For years, Canada believed it understood Sophie Trudeau. She was the radiant First Lady who laughed easily in front of cameras, the supportive political spouse who stood beside power, the emotional anchor in a carefully crafted political love story. She danced at public events. She spoke openly about vulnerability. She embraced strangers as if politics was personal. But then, something began to change. There was no announcement, no dramatic scandal, no press conference explaining what had happened. Instead, Canadians noticed something far more unsettling. Sophie Trudeau was still there, but she was no longer present. She stopped appearing where she once stood so confidently. Her voice softened, then faded. Her role shifted quietly, deliberately, almost invisibly. And the question Canada began asking was simple. Why did Sophie Trudeau step away from power while still living inside it? This is the story of Sophie Trudeau's silent retreat from the political spotlight, and the quiet changes that revealed far more than any official statement ever could. Let's uncover the truth, only on Empire Elegance. When Sophie Gregoire Trudeau first entered public life as the wife of Justin Trudeau, she represented something Canada had not seen before. She wasn't cold, she wasn't formal. Sophie spoke openly about mental health, eating disorders, self-worth, and emotional resilience. She hugged strangers, she cried in public, she smiled without restraint. To many Canadians, she felt real, almost delightfully so. In a political world built on restraint and calculation, Sophie brought emotion, and this time, that emotion became part of Justin Trudeau's political identity. They weren't just a governing couple, they were a narrative, modern, compassionate, and emotionally transparent. But narratives demand consistency, and slowly, Sophie's role began to feel less like participation and more like obligation. Behind the scenes, Sophie Trudeau was learning something few political spouses ever admit publicly. Power welcomes you, but only on its terms. There were expectations she did not design, boundaries she did not set, and a public image that increasingly felt pre-written. Her openness, once celebrated, began to clash with political discipline. Her emotional honesty, once praised, became something advisors needed to manage. Every appearance was rehearsed, every word was measured, every silence interpreted. And gradually, Sophie's public presence became more restrained. She appeared less frequently at official events. Her speeches shortened. Her interviews became rarer and safer. The woman who once spoke freely now chose her moments carefully. Canadians noticed there was no single moment that marked Sophie Trudeau's withdrawal from power. Instead, it unfolded quietly, in fragments. A missed appearance here, a canceled engagement there, a noticeable absence from causes she once championed publicly. When Justin Trudeau traveled abroad, Sophie increasingly stayed behind. When political tensions rose, her voice softened further. This wasn't avoidance, it was recalibration. She began prioritizing personal advocacy over political symbolism, private conversations over national stages, presence with her children over presence with cameras. And subtly, she stopped being positioned as part of the governing image. Canada didn't hear this shift explained. It felt the shift. What few people acknowledged publicly was the emotional weight Sophie carried privately. Being married to power means absorbing its consequences. She was scrutinized, not for policy, but for personality. Praised, criticized, analyzed, and reduced to headlines. When Justin Trudeau's leadership faced backlash, Sophie became emotional insulation. When controversies erupted, her silence was expected. When public trust wavered, she was meant to soften it. She was expected to reassure, to humanize decisions she did not make, to absorb anger she did not cause. Over time, that burden reshaped her priorities, not because she lacked strength, but because of emotional labor, when demanded endlessly, wears down identity. Inside political households, time acts differently. Days are planned weeks in advance. Spontaneity disappears, privacy becomes conditional. For Sophie Trudeau, life inside power meant living inside constant awareness. Awareness of optics, awareness of perception. Friendships became complicated. Trust became selective. Moments of vulnerability was carefully rationed. Even personal struggles had to be scheduled around politics. Over time, Sophie's emotional world shrank, not because she withdrew from people, but because power crowded everything else out. Stepping back was not about rejection, it was about survival. At the center of Sophie's retreat was a deeply personal conflict: motherhood. Raising children inside a political spotlight demands sacrifice, but also silence. Every parenting choice is scrutinized. Every family moment risks becoming public property. Sophie increasingly chose privacy for her children over symbolism for the nation. She shielded them from cameras. She limited their exposure. She resisted turning family life into reassurance optics. This decision quietly pulled her further from political visibility, because power does not pause for childhood, and she refused to let it consume theirs. As Sophie distanced herself from power, observers noticed another shift. The marriage itself became more guarded. Public affection softened. Joint appearances became less frequent. The family image grew more controlled. This wasn't scandal, it was boundaries. Sophie appeared less willing to let her marriage serve political storytelling, less willing to let intimacy become reassurance. And Justin Trudeau, facing mounting political pressure, leaned further into leadership and away from emotional symbolism. Their worlds, once intertwined publicly, began to separate quietly. Canada didn't hear about distance, it saw it. In politics, presence is power. But absence can be a message. Sophie Trudeau's quiet disappearance from the political stage forced Canadians to confront something uncomfortable. Power had lost its emotional decoder. Without Sophie's warmth, leadership felt colder. Without her presence, decisions felt heavier. Without her voice, politics sounded more mechanical. Her withdrawal didn't weaken authority. It exposed it. And perhaps that was why her silence felt louder than speeches. Canada's media noticed Sophie's retreat, but struggled to articulate it. There were no headlines declaring withdrawal, no blunt acknowledgement of emotional distance. Instead, reporters used softened language. They said she was refocusing, that she was choosing privacy, that her absence reflected personal priorities. But beneath those phrases was recognition. Sophie was no longer being used to humanize power. Her silence didn't create confusion. It created clarity. Sophie didn't write a memoir. She didn't grant a tell-all interview. She didn't turn withdrawal into spectacle. Instead, she demonstrated a quieter strength. The strength to stop explaining. The strength to stop justifying. The strength to step away without permission. Sometimes distance is not weakness. It is truth. Sophie Trudeau may no longer stand at the center of Canadian political imagery, but her influence hasn't vanished. It has transformed. She showed that strength doesn't always demand presence, that stepping back can be an act of self-respect, and that distancing oneself from power doesn't mean surrendering identity. In a system that rewards endurance over honesty, Sophie chose preservation. And Canada noticed, not because she disappeared, but because she finally stopped performing. This isn't just a story about Sophie Trudeau. It's about the unseen cost of proximity to power, about how leadership consumes families quietly, and about the courage it takes to walk away without explanation. Sophie Trudeau didn't lose power. She released it, and in doing so, she told Canada more through absence than presence ever could. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Empire Elegance, and hit the notification bell for more powerful stories about the lives and legacies of the world's most influential figures. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.